What was the quickest way you've seen a new manager screw up a workplace? We had a dude I'm going to hear called Benny. Benny had been a corporate dude and decided he wanted to run a location instead. Corporation agreed and gave him the location I work at. It was clear almost immediately that Benny was a helicopter manager. He would show up unexpectedly and hover. He'd nitpick. He'd ask weird questions. He'd send out lengthy, rambling emails about goals he had for us as a team. One morning, as my overnight was ending, he arrived unexpectedly, pulled me into his private office, and had an hour-long conversation with me where he revealed he'd been watching me and that he knew I did video editing. I was creeped the duck out, but admitted that yes, it was something I enjoyed doing periodically as a hobby, alongside a bunch of other creative pursuits. He replied that he wanted me to make a music video starring coworkers to lift the morale of the team. I replied that I'd think about it and got the duck out ASAP. My direct supervisor revealed that she had overheard him talking about firing the entire staff and rehiring from scratch. I told my girlfriend that I was considering quitting based on how the next team meeting went. That evening, I got an email to the tune that Benny had been forced by corporate to resign. He had been caught acting like a ducking sociopath, and that in his 1-month tenure, employee morale had reached an all-time low. It's been a few years since Benny left, but I remain paranoid about him still to this day. Story 2. Came in, took over a department, decided to get rid of people who were contractors, even if they'd been there for 3+ years. Didn't care what they did, just axed them. A month later, critical systems were failing, and the people left there just shrugged. He'd asked the people who knew how those systems ran. Story 3. Okay, this is going to be wordy, but it deserves the attention to detail. In college, I worked for the campus mail service. The regular USPs would deliver all mail for the college to us, and then we would sort and deliver it to the various departments and dorms, who would then in turn get it to the correct individuals. Our basic system was we had 8 delivery routes. When sorting mail, we would look at it, and depending on the department, it would get sorted into a cubby for the delivery route that department was in. Then, an hour or two before the route was due to go out, we would take the mail for that route over to a separate board that had all the individual stops on it, and sort it down individually before bagging it up to be delivered. After a couple days, this becomes pretty easy for new employees. Life science route has life sciencey sounding departments, ag has ag, etc. You could mostly guess and probably be right about which route a given department was in. Well, one day the big boss, not my day-to-day supervisor who actually runs the sorting and delivery part, comes in and announces they've invested in a new computerized sorting system to speed the process up. Next day I came in, they had it set up. They had completely reorganized the sorting boards, and there were 2 massive stations with slots for every individual department and a computer with a headset. However, instead of labeling the slots with the department names, they just had 4-digit codes on them. The new system worked like this. Take a piece of mail and look at the person's name. Then speak their last name into the voice recognition headset you're wearing. Keep in mind this is 2002 or so, and the tech is quite a bit behind even the maddening stuff we have today. Also, at universities, there are often a lot of faculty from other countries with difficult names. So if you manage to get the system to recognize the correct name, it displays a list of people with that last name. If it's something common like Smith or Jones, you're probably going to have several pages. If the person you want isn't on the first page, you have to say next to get to the next page. If the system thinks it heard something different, for instance, the last name Knox, it'll take you there instead and you have to start over. If you manage to avoid that pitfall and do find the correct entry, you have to speak the number of the person from the list. And again, if the system misheard, there's no backing up, start from step 1. So again, if you manage to get the correct number to come up, it will display a 4-digit code in large numbers on the screen, 3572 or whatever. You then find the 3572 slot on the giant board and place that single piece of mail into it. Brilliant, except 9.8% of the mail has a department name on it. As I explained earlier, that's how it's delivered, by department, and previously it was always sorted by department. If they just put a label on the slot that said entomology instead of 3572, then all I would have to do is read entomology on the letter and then stick it in the slot labeled entomology. But instead, I had to translate through a number system just to make the computer necessary. All the computer system did was add unreliable voice recognition and about 5 steps to the process of putting an entomology letter in an entomology slot. It was, of course, a complete disaster. A slow sorter, slacking off with a hangover, could probably get 30 pieces of mail sorted in a minute on the normal system. A motivated sorter, trying for speed, using the computer, probably couldn't break double digits in a minute. On an average week, we probably got 10-15 carts of mail delivered. More on Mondays and tailing off as the week went on. We wouldn't always get all the Monday mail sorted and delivered Monday, but it was rare to have anything for the week left by quitting time Friday. The first week with the computer, we had less than half the mail sorted. By the end of the second week, I bet we were at least a week behind. My immediate supervisor reorganized the layout after it became clear this wasn't working, but he had to incorporate the computer to placate the bug boss, because we'd paid a lot of money for it. So what he did was just reinstate the old system, but with the boards in slightly different locations. Also, whoever's using the 2 spots in the corners, wear the headset while you're over there, so if the big boss walks through it, it will look like we're using it, even though we're totally not at all. The computer was pretty good for exactly one thing: lookups. Mail that had the person's name, but no department or dorm. So we had to look them up to figure out where their first-class mail went. That was way less than 1/3 of our mail, though. Bulk mail didn't get looked up. It got shredded per official policy. Bulk rate doesn't guarantee extra work if the address is insufficient. Even when using the computer for lookups, I would just type the names instead of trying to speak to them once I realized that was an option. Story 4. Oh boy. Well, I had a manager at a former workplace who was an a-hole. And not just an a-hole, he was completely incompetent in his role. The department was the housekeeping floor care department of a hospital. He didn't know how to use his staff well at all. Worst of all, he never did housekeeping or floor care. He did security and was so bad at that, they kicked him out of that department. So we had a guy who sucked in his last role who was given a managerial position in a department he knew nothing about. It didn't just affect the department, it affected the whole hospital. Rooms weren't getting cleaned properly, floors never got done, and instead of taking the blame and fixing it, he just blamed everyone else and fired people. All he was good at was being a hard ass who fired or vaguely threatened people. And then his leads and supervisors were either people he neutered into being ineffective or holes just like him. Thankfully, they were never a combo of the two, but that was every lead or supervisor basically. It was so unorganized. One day I came in as a floor guy. The next I came in to do crap I never signed up for, like cleaning patient rooms or the ear, which was okay. And then he came up with the stupidest thing I ever saw in a job: the bed barn. The bed barn was a sweatshop of a slave, an a-hole-head, who I call Satan's ex-wife because even the depths of hell are too good for that Karen and her little pet. Nobody wanted that spot, and he even fired a few people for refusing to take it or taking it, and then realizing what stupidity it consisted of. There was the Karen lead who sent out rooms to take beds to or bring beds from, the pet who cleaned most of the beds, and the slave who went and brought every bed up and down and usually had to help clean the beds in the rooms too when the Karen or the pet went on break. I was that slave. I only went off of my easy schedule, floor care and the ER, because that manager lied and said I would be the lead or the number 2, and I would keep my same pay. The weekends off also helped. Unfortunately, the weekends off didn't mean crap, because not only did I not get my same pay rate, I didn't get my time and weekend differentials either. So I was getting paid less to be talked down to by an ugly IDK, what was worse, the inside or the outside, inside by a hair, just a hair, Karen and her hat-haired pet. Her hair looks like one of those old lady church hats. While they didn't do crap but criticize me for not doing all 3 jobs at once and taking my lunch and bathroom breaks. How ducking dare I take a piss? And they listened to the same reggae songs all ducking day. I grew up on some of those songs as my stepmom is Jamaican, but crap, even she switched it up. Meanwhile, the manager forgot to realize I was capable of doing floors in the ER, and when I got baited into taking this new role, the floors went to crap, the ear went to crap, and everyone was mad at my department because he was stuck on doing the bed barn, which I hated doing and liked doing floors in the ear. A smart manager would say, well, he's good at doing the floors, and he's the best person who does the ear. And he actually likes doing both and hates the bed barn. Why not just put him back there? Not this a hole. He threatened to, and eventually did, fire me if I didn't get back in line and do the stupid bed barn, which failed a week after I left because nobody else wanted to do it and nobody liked him or that Karen lead. Oh, and he also used the bed barn to do projects because the floor guys didn't want to do those. I never signed up to do that either. Anyway, the other departments eventually learned how he treated me. When you're as good at what I do, even the doctors and nurses take notice, and tried to get him fired. Not sure he's gone yet, but last I heard, him and that Karen lead get no respect from the department or other departments, especially the ER. They hate them. The floor guys ignore him and treat him like the scum of the hospital, and the other managers of other departments don't respect him. Security got a good laugh. The day he fired me, he had to send the one guy that I didn't know from security to escort off the property, but when I came back a week later, the other officers all showed me love. It was nice. Anyway, duck that guy. Story 5. Guy gets hired as a supervisor. Worked on a Disney cruise before, so he thinks he knows how to run a bar. During his interview, he points out to a few staff how they're doing minor things wrong. Somehow, he's hired and immediately starts making changes, getting mad whenever anyone does something other than his way. Meanwhile, he's rarely seen on the floor, rather, He's in the office creating cocktail guidebooks while it's extremely busy at the bar. Got into an argument one night where another supervisor who wasn't working at the time got a bit drunk and told him he never helps out and how everyone disliked him. He tries to get said supervisor fired. It backfires, and everyone complains about him instead. This all took place in the span of a month. I quit shortly before he was fired. Story 6. Worked for a brokerage and investment banking place that had sized up rapidly from the lean, mean startup days. I was around the 100th employee. Shortly after I started, they hired a full-time office manager for the first time. Her first official act was to eliminate the free Snapple in the break room to save money. I never saw anyone become so despised so fast. Everyone refused to comply with her direction after that, ignored her in meetings, just generally froze her out. She was gone in a couple of months. Story 7. I worked as a cook in a restaurant in a country setting. American food, burgers, fries, some simple seafood, steak specials. Nice food, but simple and easy to prepare, and filling portions for the price. They lost their head chef on short notice, and we were chefless for a month or two. The new guy they brought in wanted to change everything. He wanted to redesign the kitchen, which it did need and which was planned. But then he started talking about getting rid of the burgers on the menu, getting rid of the deep fryer, started trying to sell these little vegetarian, ornately plated small dishes for high prices, ordering little flowery garnishes and telling the cooks they were all going to need to buy their own $50 pair of plating tweezers. Started hiring one by one employees from his old restaurants, creating this weird social divide between his cult followers and the existing employees who know that a hardworking farmhand will not pay $18 for some steamed beets with herb goat cheese smeared on the plate. Not many people were very happy. He didn't last long. I feel a little bad for those employees who jumped ship to follow him, only to be let go when he was maybe a month later. Story 8. My old new manager jumped on the job, first manager position, proceeded to demoralize the duck out of our entire department to the point where she literally had to call us into a team meeting to group apologize for being such a Karen in front of our GM. Then continued to be a Karen, because why not? Story 9. I once worked for a Chinese real estate firm in London years back. They sent a Chinese manager from mainland China to boost the sales in London. This guy had a degree in a university in England, so there was supposed to be no communication difficulties. And he had brilliant performance record in China's and Middle East branches, so everything seemed fine to us. The guy was good in what he did. He was very professional, very dedicated to the job, very smart and experienced, worked very hard, but he carried on the way how he worked in China and Middle East and London, and so it did not work very well for him. He called a female staff around 10 in the night to discuss about the marketing, but the call was picked up by the boyfriend, who suspected the manager was harassing his girlfriend. If you want to talk about work, why not leave to tomorrow morning? Why do you have to call at late night? Why the hell I can't call my staff when I want? The conversation went on as such, and in the end, the new manager was cautioned. The thing did not stop here. Around 2016-ish, the time when the most recent military coup in Turkey occurred, that female staff and her boyfriend happened to spend holiday there. The manager knew the coup in Turkey on late TV news and text messaged the woman, something like, "Are you all right? I am very worried about your safety." This message was a bomb to the boyfriend. He misunderstood and firmly believed our manager was harassing the girl, and he really called the police and solicitor when back in London, and the law enforcement really came to the office to caution the poor manager when he was doing a marketing pitch. It was hugely embarrassing for him. Story 10. I used to work at one of the more popular coffee shop in my city. There were a lot of things that went wrong, but these are some of my favorites. This was my first restaurant gig, but I've been told it's common to be offered a free meal from the menu on your break. It seems pretty simple. I worked there a bit under 2 years before new management started. We never had an issue with having meals on our breaks. Suddenly, the kitchen starts complaining about having to make these meals. Here's some context. A normal 8-hour Saturday morning shift for the kitchen saw between 400 to 500 food tickets. 7 to 8 employee meals would be made during that time. The employee meals would be added to the line of tickets and made like any other meal. We would work until our meals were ready. We weren't given special priority or anything. Well, management took the complaints very seriously and created family meal. One meal was made at a specific time and left on a back table for employees to eat. This system would work if everyone took their break at the same time. But our breaks were staggered, because who's going to take a customer's order if the whole staff breaks at once? Not to mention the line would be 50 plus people at this point. Anyway, breaks took about 2-3 hours to fully get through, so the last person got to eat 3-hour-old tacos or eggs. Lovely. The other issue was half of the front of house staff had dietary restrictions that were not taken into account, so they would not get to eat. I had to personally ask for myself and other coworkers to have more food made when the food ran out, or if a co-worker has a dietary restriction. I was often treated as a problem when asking. This went on for about 2 months. Myself and a few other front-of-house staff members fought this super hard but never made any progress. The food quality eventually started degrading until one day we were offered peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. At the time, this restaurant was selling $15 steak scrambles, $20 quinoa bowls, $18 hot chicken and waffles, etc. There was one Saturday where the sous chef in charge of making this meal decided he was too busy to make the meal. So I overheard management telling a few employees an hour into their shift that they wouldn't be able to eat for the day. They were looking at easily making 400, 500 coffee drinks that day. I blew up on the manager that day and said how unacceptable it was to not feed your staff on our busiest day of the week. They didn't get a meal. Half of the front of house staff, myself included, left about 3 months after these changes were put into effect. One of my favorite issues was overstaffing front of house and then constantly complaining that labor costs are way too high. We could easily run the place with 7 or 8 people, but management would double schedule positions, pushing that to 12 or 14 people some days, sometimes even triple scheduling positions. We made most of our income from tips, so this really hurt our income. In my last month, they started tipping in people training as well as admin people in the back, which we knew was illegal, and were looking into making an actual case for it. Story 11. When I worked for Best Buy Mobile, we had a manager transfer in from another store to take over our department. She was supposed to hire a full-time lead, and the job rec went out, but she decided to hire her friend from her old store, whose dad happened to be the district manager. Myself and other tenured and experienced employees were basically tossed aside for this position. She and this girl spent tons of time in the manager's office, would order Uber Eats every day, and sit in the office for hours, eating and doing who knows what. Employee morale went right down the crapter, and people started calling out all the time. We were constantly shorthanded, and she couldn't be arsed to come help us out when we had lines to the back of the department. This led to a lot of customer complaints about us, not about her, about the employees, who were just doing the best they could. I finally lost my crap on a day where we had to reorganize the whole department according to a new planogram, and switch around displays and try to get as much product on the shelves as possible before a big visit the next day. I came in around 1 p.m., found out we were again short-handed, so I tried to find our manager so I could get started on all the work we had to do, because I was not staying until midnight getting this done when I was scheduled off at 9. She was EMEA for about 3 hours. Finally found her, and she said she'd grab the list for me so I could get started. She disappeared again and didn't give me the task list until about 7:30 p.m. My other closer left at 8:30 as scheduled, so it was just me and 2 guys in MP3 players who didn't give a crap about their job. I tried to get as much done as I could, but it was also a truck night. At that time, all of the shipments would get put out by the warehouse team except for mobile, because we had to check in all the phones we received and make sure they were all accounted for and placed in locked cabinets. The store closed, and we had a bunch left to do. I had already redone one of the walls with new price tags and everything. The product just had to be put out. I put the 2 guys in MP3s on that project because they were no help otherwise, and I worked on completing the list. Around 10:30, the manager appears and is upset with me that the work isn't done. She disappears again. I finish the list and clock out around midnight. The next day, I saw that she had slashed my hours to make up for the extra 3 hours she made me stay that night. I started looking for another job immediately. On my last day, I had an exit interview and I held nothing back. I told them about everything she had been doing and not doing, and made it clear that she was the reason the department was losing its best salesperson. That was my last retail job, and I'm never going back to it. I now make more than twice, sometimes 4 times as much as I made there. I hope they go under. Story 12. Our team had a 15-minute break at 10 a.m. we always have done. Our new manager arrived, and it turned out this break wasn't actually official, so he stopped it happening. The place very quickly fell apart. It basically required people ignoring the rules to get things fixed. Working into lunch was very common, or staying behind a little bit late to get a job done. So when this break happened, we stopped going above our job description and did it to the letter. They had to spend a fortune calling in contractors to fix things that we had been fixing but weren't supposed to. Jobs got delayed constantly because we would pack up and leave to go to our lunch breaks exactly on time, or drop a job halfway through to go home exactly at finishing time. Story 13. Oh, one I can answer. My old job was a vineyard cafe, and the owner was a straight rate a hole. The manager was always difficult to work with, but became even more so when she decided to become a singer and quit to pursue her dreams with the other Instagram artists that frequented open mic afternoons there. The worst part, neither she nor the owner hired a replacement. Instead, whatever waitress was the most senior on that day was in charge. Some things that were a thing every shift. The kitchen would close an hour before the cafe did. Neither chef cared about anything except abusing the duck out of their staff. So once it was time to leave, they were gone. People would come in 5 minutes before the cafe closed and demand food. The head waitress would agree and drag the chefs back to start everything up again. There were shifts where I went overtime for nearly 2.5 hours. The abuse. With nobody managing anything, the chefs screamed and snapped at everyone, to the point where the boss hired someone to be a go-between for the front and back of house. There were also a lot of incel-like and anti-vax comments thrown at workers, and a few times at customers. Some came from the boss himself, so there was no mediator. Shifts were a nightmare. Some days you didn't know you were working until they messaged that you should have been there 20 minutes ago. People like me were demoted without reason or straight up fired because of a vain attempt to reorganize. Shifts often ran 9-10 hours at a time, and the only person who got a break was the head waitress. A lot of people started to quit. We had people walk out during a self-proclaimed lunch break and never come back. One of the bartenders was once forced to work a 14 8-hour shift, and when she tried to leave after 10, she was chased into the car park by one of the senior waitresses. I once left to see the kitchen hand sitting staring off into space outside the animal pens for hours, and he was also never seen again. Another bartender threatened to quit, and with the boss not around, she went to the head chef. His exact words as I heard them were, "You'd loosen up more if you took it up the ass every once in a while." She left not long before I did, and when I left, I was given a torrent of screaming about how unprofessional I was, and how I couldn't leave because I can't expect to walk out and have that be the end of it. The worst of all was that the old manager became a regular customer with her singer friends and was every bit entitled to customer. She still let herself behind the bar and into the kitchen. She would come and collect her food when it was ready, order the waiters around, and stay hours past close. Forgot to clarify. She had only been there for a few months. She got the job because she was friends with the owner. Manager messed up a business that was crappy to begin with by leaving and not hiring a replacement. Managers are important. Every business needs one story team. I worked at a Taco Bell KFC. And while we did have a perpetual skeleton crew, owners loved saving on labor. We made it work with minimal customer complaints. Well, new manager comes in and decides, so change all kinds of crap that shouldn't matter to an area manager. Where the wraps for the food is, the bags on the drive though, and the cold bar on our line. Now technically the before and after setups were both fine as far as health regulations go, but if you've ever worked in fast food, a lot of that stuff is muscle memory. I could make most orders damn near blindfolded, but Crap for Brains decided that it had to be changed. He threatened to call the police on one manager who he fired because she wasn't leaving. Well, she was very pregnant and waiting on her ride. He wanted us to change dates on food to keep from throwing it away. He wanted us out right after we closed her, but also didn't want any pre-closing done until we closed. He wanted us to use 2 servings of protein instead for certain items, and when the store was busy, he'd be our schmoozing instead of managing. I could go on, and I did report stuff to corporate, but to no avail. He did eventually get fired, which I called after he fired me. I refused to stuff large items into a small bag, and then he got fired from another chain. But the best karma was when this crap bag bought a local catfish buffet place that had been around since I was a child. It was very popular with the locals, and the owner's son had a successful place of their own. Well, when this waste of humanity bought it, it lasted about a year, again called it. And now it's back to the old owner, to my knowledge, and is doing fine. Dude was just incompetent and bullied people to get his way. But being vindicated is pretty great. Story 15. Had a manager get promoted who read a self-help book about business communication and decided that is what we need. She hired them to give us a day-long seminar at 8:30 a.m., 4:30 p.m. on a Saturday. People pushed back. She responded by sending out an email that this is mandatory now, and if you were going on vacation, you have to show her proof of that. Then there was a couple of rambling emails about how she's trying to help us and cannot believe no one would want to do this and that when her kids throw tantrums that they need guidance. On the day of the seminar, the manager showed up in the morning to give us a pep talk. The person running the seminar asked if she was going to stick around today to see our progress. Manager said no because her weekends are family time with her and that is sacred to her. Then she said goodbye and good luck and walked out the door. Within weeks, people were finding other jobs. In 6 months, more than 70% of the people at that seminar were gone. Story 16. We were a pioneer account. The account was a huge US telecommunications company that handed their department to be outsourced to our center from another that ducked it up. We were excited. For the first 6 months, we flourished. So much that the company thought it was a good idea to make our operations manager move to another location to get him to improve that. So who replaced our OM? The old OM that handled the account at the other center, who ducked up. Basically, ran the account to the ground in less than 6 months, kept hiring more and more people, only promoted people he liked. Job assignments weren't clear, people kept being reassigned. At the end, we had over 500 employees, and he had to fire 300 of them because the account only needed 200. The company suffered a lawsuit and lost the account. Story 17. I was the assistant manager at a pizza chain. The company decided to outside hire without even giving me an interview. I decided that maybe this was the right decision and stayed at my job. My next month was spent training her on how to be my boss. Understandably, this was horrible. So I decided to step down and be a delivery driver, and even though I was no longer a manager, she continued to treat me like her training manager. She spouted off on how awful the current employees were to me in private. Finally, she told me she was going to fire my friend John. I decided to call John at home immediately during my next delivery. While I was gone, he drove to work and chewed her out. When I got back, she chewed me out for sharing private information, as if I should have even know the information anyway. I quit and went to the competition. Their school account clients came with me when I pitched them too. Story 18. I worked at a restaurant all throughout high school and bit into college during breaks. My manager at the time was awesome to work with. So much so, I suggest that she hire my youngest sister when she can start working as my sister, and I share the same work ethic, and I knew she would love it there. About a year into me leaving and my sister hiring on, the owners asked the manager I knew to move to another store to save their sales, which she did. To replace her, they put a manager from another store that was being shut down in the helm. What was his first act as a manager? Well, to get rid of all the current employees that the regulars knew and requested by name over a period of time and hire the employees that were left out to dry from the Pervious store. This, quite surprisingly to him, didn't work out well for his sales. His team was nowhere close to being as welcoming as the team I worked with and that my sister started working with. He clearly favored his team too. He really didn't understand the concept that a customer was fine with their meal and didn't need to be checked up on every 5 minutes personally. I'm sure there were other things that I'm not aware of, and I don't need to know these. Eventually, I went in and was talking to a former coworker. She told me she was pulled off to the side by the owners and asked to step in as manager effective immediately as the store was not doing well under the new manager. I congratulated her for the early promotion, and within a week, the store was doing its old sales just like it used to under my former coworker's management. She's rehired those workers that wanted to come back and has since hired some younger waiters, waitresses, and new back-of-house folks who are so much more friendly and make the restaurant worth stopping into. Story 19. First time she met me, she walked right past my desk and looked all over the work area to find something wrong. She started asking me if I knew how to do my job. I was there 12 years by this point. This was not an isolated incident, and she acted this way to everyone. She never worked in the field, but had been a manager previously, so it seemed like she was intimidated by people who knew their jobs. Story 20. One of my family members/friend opened a Subway shop in my little city. We'll call him Jake. Jake is a very nice, friendly, and funny guy, and lots of people came to the shop partly because of him. He had 4 employees working shifts, from which several became my friends later on. 1 year after the opening, Jake had troubles with tenants of a flat he owned. Those guys didn't pay rent, destroyed part of the flat, had constant problems with the cops, etc., etc. It put Jake in financial troubles, and while his wife earned a small salary, he had a smaller one because it squacked their first year. So more and more his associate, that we will call Philip, took over. He owned other Subway shops in a nearby town. Philip was the complete opposite of Jake. Not funny, aggressive, and too straightforward speaking. Employees, of course, fled the shop one by one. During a special day in our town, a group of people came to order subs. They were 5. It was a very busy day, but it was a slow hour, think 3 p.m. One of the guys from the group sat on a table outside to take it for his friend and avoid adding more people inside. Philip chased him like he was a street beggar, saying he had not ordered yet, so he wasn't a customer, so he couldn't sit here. Not only the 5 left, but 3 people more after that. Then after almost a year of almost only Philip, Jake resigned and sold back his shares to Philip. That sold them to a couple. They were nice, but not prepared for that. The husband worked on site and was so slow and afraid that it was painful to watch. He was also very heavy with bad jokes. The wife was the intendant, but the husband screwed every process she tried to put because he was so slow. They hired even less enthusiastic younglings to work there. The food seemed less and less fresh and oxidated, and finally, 2 years ago, it closed down for good. So, 2 different managing teams succeeded in crushing a not that profitable but still profitable shop with nice people and tuned it to a pit of despair where junkies, mentally ill junkies, and other shady people went when they had the munchies. Edit. Jake is very fine, still an awesome guy, and is a cab ambulance driver for the biggest company in the region. The bad tenants left and were replaced by a nice family of Romanian people who are very nice, and he earned a very good salary and all now. Story 21. I had a manager named, we'll say Larry, when I worked for an airline. He only lasted a few months, but came in boasting about his prior experience with another company. Over time, he grew increasingly stubborn, and it all culminated with one particular plan that he was convinced would save us by routing all of our baggage to a single conveyor belt line. All of us supervisors, and I mean all of us, explained to him that his plan was not going to work, since we knew there were going to be 500 plus bags for several flights in the span of a few hours coming down that line, and we did not have the staff or the space to work on that belt, and it was guaranteed to jam. We had the numbers, we had the on-the-ground experience, everything. I tried to talk him out of it in a last-ditch effort, since I was the one who had to physically make the change in the computer, and he shut me down almost immediately. So the plan was a go. It failed so spectacularly that not only did I immediately get a call and message from him on the morning of my day off, the start date, but his manager called me requesting that I make any necessary changes to remedy it, as well as several other high-up individuals. He was let go within the week. Story 22. I recently quit my job at a family-owned restaurant in a small town. I started working there under an already crafty manager who was insanely mean to every employee and talked crap about them, no matter how hard they worked, and it was an overall toxic experience. She stepped down from management when her ex-husband, the original owner, came back to manage the restaurant. At first, I thought it was an improvement, but I quickly realized that it wasn't the case. He was a real slave driver of a boss. He thought that since he never stopped working his 2 jobs, everyone else should be at work all the time as well. He wouldn't even stay at the restaurant to manage it and would instead be at his second job all day, putting the pressure on a lot of the teenage employees to successfully manage a restaurant on their own. He didn't believe in time off and would argue whenever you needed a day off for work, or would try to schedule you outside of your availability to compromise for not being able to work that day. Whenever he did show up to manage his own restaurant, it was to drink all the alcohol we serve and get drunk, or sometimes high, on the job and go bother customers who just wanted to eat their food and leave. Because his definition of customer service is sitting down at the customer's table and talking up his plans for the restaurant. He repeatedly took equipment and dishes to his second job, leaving us scrambling to find certain things we needed to prep food. He would only order the bare minimum of food and supplies we needed to run our business, leaving us to run out of popular items on our busy nights and get yelled at by entitled customers who can't tell that it isn't the employee's fault that we don't have what they want. He would also force his 15-year-old son to work without pay to cover his absence on our busy days, leaving me as the only adult in the restaurant and placing sole responsibility on me. The job quickly became a drain on my mental health, and it's honestly a miracle I survived as long as I did. He also didn't pay any of us on time, ever. He would always flat out lie about when payroll was supposed to be processed, and I wouldn't get my paycheck until anywhere from a few days to a few weeks late. I doubt that the restaurant is going to survive much longer. He ran it right into the ground before I left, complaining that we didn't make enough money and he could barely cover payroll as is. I definitely don't regret moving on from that crafty job. Story 23. This one's fairly recent, about half a year or so ago. Our manager was getting replaced, and every 4 or so years our managers have to switch location due to control and the like. Our old manager was great. He never watched how we worked, assuming the mid-level manager would deal with those issues, and they did. He was also very friendly to both customers and employees, though arguably a bit too lenient. Well, he is leaving, and our new manager arrives. The first week he just gets settled in, nothing major, but primarily since he'd only been working with the assistant manager and the mid-level managers. But then he covers a shift as a mid-level manager since there was none available. Immediately becomes a douche for a person being 2 in late, which was a known occurrence approved by the standard manager. This person was a student, and if public transport didn't work with him, he wouldn't get there in time, but a few minutes is not a big deal at all. Only after this comes my first time working with the man. I had met him briefly in his first week. I greeted him with my standard morning, even though it was halfway in the afternoon. Where I'm from, morning is a common greeting. He, however, got annoyed and pulled me aside just to ask about that, so I state that morning is perfectly normal. His response was, "Do you have a problem with me?" At the time, I didn't yet, but that already changed then and there. The next clash was when I was lunching at work. A younger employee had just finished his shift and was walking down the stairs when the manager wanted to go up. Note, this is a narrow staircase. Only one person could climb it at a time. The manager got annoyed that the employee wouldn't let him go first. At this point, I stepped in because the younger employee was clearly nervous and didn't know how to respond. I just said something akin to, he already was halfway down, so then he naturally had the right of passage. The man agreed, and for a moment I thought he wasn't that bad. Then he said the lines that completely destroyed any positive credit he had. But in the end, who's always right? The boss, that's who. He went on a vacation after his 3rd week, got an infection, and after a month of having this infection got a burnout. Soon, a new manager will arrive, so I hope she's better. We have an interim manager that I'm fond of, a bit akin to our old manager but more serious, so I'm sad she's leaving. Story 24. I was at a popular store for young girls. I came in as a supervisor and worked hard. I worked at a couple different branches and then applied for the AM job at a store that was a little bit further away than the one I was working in, meaning I'd have to get a bus and a train to work. I didn't care. I'd managed to progress, and that was awesome. Not long after I moved into the AM role, we had a new regional director come in, and lots of the store managers jumped ship. I carried on though and applied to be AM at a store closer to home. I get an interview. Fantastic. Day before the interview, the RM calls me to cancel the interview as something has come up, and she'll contact me in a few days to rearrange. Fair enough, I think. These things happen. I never get a call back, and the next thing I know, one of her friends is now at the store. I'd still not met this RM in person yet, but there was a manager meeting coming up that I went to because my manager was on annual leave. First time I meet the RM is me giving her my notice. So many good managers left within the first 3 months of her being there. When she pulled stunts like that, which she pulled with me, I'm not surprised. She didn't last much longer, if I recall correctly. Story 25. We worked in teams of 2 on 8-hour rotating shifts. That meant there were 8 crew members in total. We split our duties between us to keep our workplace clean and properly provisioned. New manager decides to promote one in each team as a sort of supervisor. The obvious happened. The new supervisor says to his colleague that they should do X, Y, or Z. Colleague responds, "Duck off. That's what they're paying you the extra for." Ruined relationships for years. Story 26. Create a nearly impossible bonus structure by quarter. Change the rules of the bonus when announcing that no one got it, then letting the employees know that not only have they not gotten the bonus, but so far performance into the new quarter has made it statistically impossible for them to get the bonus this quarter as well. At my last workplace, they set a requirement that files should be processed within 24 hours, and we could get a bonus of $500 each quarter if 95% of our files were done in that time period, 95% of the time. There were a lot of issues that could cause problems that were out of our control, so most often people hit about 80%. Nevertheless, we tried. The quarter ends, and our manager announces that the rules weren't for each of us, but for the whole team. So if anyone didn't get the bonus, no one did. I pulled up his old email announcing the bonus and asked him where it said it was a collective bonus. He got pissed and recalculated. He was overloaded, so it took a few days. He finally gets back to us telling us that even individually calculated, we wouldn't have gotten it. And by the way, since we're over 5% into the quarter and none of you have hit this mark yet, you're not getting the bonus now. Our group, who was previously mildly disgruntled but tolerant of their misery, became enraged. Most of them were gone within a few months. This was followed with dangling a promotion in front of everyone, having everyone interview, then deciding to not promote any of us, but instead to bring outsiders that didn't know our business at all and to run the show. So not only did we not get the promotion, but we had to train people who were paid better. I only stuck around because I interviewed the best and was given a small promotion to start a new department under the coup. Story 27. My sister's replacement boss in a pharmaceutical company a few years ago. She was based out of the UK operation, but the company had recently been bought by GSK. They immediately fired my sister's boss, who had been with the company for 25 years, and installed their man, a guy from the US who had never lived in the UK, didn't know about British culture, and attempted to force us work culture on everyone, including working all hours and weekends. Up until then, the company was running great, and all my sister's colleagues and the reps under her loved the job and were loyal to the company. Within a month under the new American boss, morale was so low that several people quit. The boss called a meeting where he screamed and shouted and raged that this would never happen in the US, and he should fire them all. Another month goes by, a few more resign. This guy has earned a bad reputation, which makes it really hard to hire replacements. This meant my sister had a bunch of open rep positions she couldn't fill, which had a direct effect on the earnings for her part of the country. A trend apparently seen throughout each region where an American boss had been inserted. 3 months after he started, they fired my sister for poor results, which is laughable. Until the American came and caused a bunch of resignations, she'd been at or near the top of all regions in the 20-plus years she'd been there. A month after she was fired, she found out that all the American managers that were brought in were fired, and the sales operations of the original company were wrapped up. So it would appear that it was intentional on behalf of GSK to get rid of as many people as possible, as cheaply as possible. Story 28. An assistant manager for my story, so I guess not as impactful. I'll call her Sam. We just lost our AM due to a very personal life reason, and it was very sudden. To fill the position, they just transferred over an existing AM and finished training some other guy, I guess. I was closing at this point in time, and it was no surprise to any of my coworkers that I took long bus commute. If I didn't get out at about 7:30 at the latest, then I would miss my one and only bus that made it to my neighborhood. The only turn to get there is off of the freeway. and I was terrified about walking that path. I told Sam about what I'd do with the last AM and when I absolutely had to clock off to get home safe, to which her reply was, "That's not what happened at my store." Ducking what? Among a number of other things, she basically told me that the manager at her old store does everything I do at my store, and I'd have to bend to those rules. It was ducking awful. I was loaded with more than half of the work that I was used to having balanced, and she refused to lift a finger for me. When 7:32 rolled around, I was actually thrown into a panic attack and I just grabbed my crap and left, booking it to the bus stop. Sure enough, I'd caught a later bus and missed my last connecting bus, but luckily a friend was able to drive me the rest of the way. I explained what happened to the actual manager, who was very understanding and let me drop that close for good. Sam didn't last at our store for more than 2 weeks. Story 29. It was totally me. Here goes. I was hired as assistant GM to an absolutely lovely, caring GM who was everyone's doormat. This guy would bail workers out of jail, wake up hours early to pick up people without cars, even though they'd never be ready. There were days he'd sleep there in a restaurant overnight because a third of our workers would call off on a daily basis. He literally fell asleep at the wheel and crashed his car one night because he was so tired. So I was hired as assistant GM. I was hated from the get-go. We had people that would literally cry if you asked them to do a simple task like prep meat patties. We had people high to the point they couldn't work and literally drool all over themselves. We had a girlfriend stalking her shift manager, boyfriend, to the point he couldn't do his job. We had the 2 addicts that would argue through the shift and make everyone tense. All of the ridiculous call-offs. And finally, we had the girl who weighed at least 300 pounds, could only stay in one spot, would cry if she had to do anything that requires more than taking 2 steps and couldn't understand why her foot hurt. She was also mean to everyone, but if anyone answered back, she'd fly off the handle. This poor GM had been killing himself, trying to hold this place together. I lasted about 6 months. The GM hurt himself. I went to pick up people for shift that called me as I was pulling into their driveway at 4 a.m. to say it was my fault they couldn't come in. Then, the district manager showed up, got a taste of what this place was like, and literally started throwing things around like a 2-year-old. That was it. I was gone. I couldn't change the mess or the monsters this poor guy had created, so I bolted while the district manager was having a temper tantrum. I'm just so sorry for the actual GM. Story 30. So, my last summer before college, I worked at a Cold Stoner creamery. Owner-manager was super nice, way awesome. Made sure to balance people's shifts, so you always got enough hours and always had 2 people closing. We used to have lines around the building because he offered a 10-mile discount to other local employees, which then a few other food businesses found out about and honored as well. He also had a policy that it didn't really matter what the coupon specified, and you could apply the discount to any item. Have a $1 off a regular ice cream with 1 mix in? Nah. We'll use it on your shake, it's all good. We all would get about 30 plus in tips. Then, he sold it to this mean Asian lady. Her first move, no more 10-10 neighbor discount. We lost about 10% of our daily customers from that. Then, she implemented the coupon must be exact rule. No longer could we discount your large with 5 mix-ins with the off coupon. Business declined further. Then, finally, she started ducking up hours. We had a calendar where we would write any days we needed off, but she just ignored it. She also decided that she didn't like me, so guess who got the 1-day-a-week shift for 4 hours to unload and stock everything? Yep, I did. Luckily, because she wouldn't give people the days off they requested, I would usually pick up a couple extra shifts. One of my coworkers quit after she specified she needed her birthday and the day after off, and she didn't get it. By the end of the summer, we had lost 3 people, went from a line around the building to maybe doing $50 a day in total sales. And rather than be safe and have 2 staff members close, we would only have 1. I got injured at work because of it and had to quit shortly afterwards, sprained my ankle, but I only had about 4 weeks left until college started. The Cold Stone was closed 6 months later. Story 31. There's a pretty big corporation in my city that specializes in workwear and PPE. They started a new campaign for account managers to call customers and sell to them, and employed 40 plus people to start it. I was included. So we all go through 4 weeks of training together. By the end of it, we're all pretty close, and it's a good company we're working for. They paid well, treat their staff well. The last week of training before we all went active, we're introduced to, let's call him Steve. Steve had been used to managing call centers, the type of environment where they treat their company like dirt with high turnovers. The company we all worked for didn't want this. Skip ahead a few weeks. People were a little apprehensive about Steve, but he seemed okay-ish for a floor manager. There had been an incident in the girls' toilets where someone had accidentally left a stain on the seat. Steve calls everyone together. The building wasn't ready to accommodate a 40-plus person meeting, so a lot of people just sat on the floor. Steve is shouting, saying we're all disgusting. One of the girls, Katie, giggles because of how ducking stupid this whole situation is. With this, Steve goes berserk. He goes bright red and starts screaming at Katie. Katie was about 40 years old. She wasn't taking this crap. She got up with tears in her eyes from the embarrassment and went straight to HR. This was the first of about 5 different members of staff complaining about Steve's professionalism over a period of about 4 months. Story 32. Poor management in general is a good way to duck things up. Worked in a Midwestern gas station chain for half a year. Well, the manager liked to keep dead weight workers and would sometimes hire people who were just impossible to work with. Kind of a too many chiefs, not enough natives scenario. Well, she hired this one person that she said years ago she would never hire back again. This person was seriously impossible to work with. She'd call people stupid, gits, idiots, and if you even thought about saying anything mean about her, she would verbally attack you nonstop. Well, one day I was working register. I have a really large phone, and with the type of pants I had to wear, it wouldn't stay in my pocket. So I had my phone by my register outside of customers' view. She comes in and assumes I was on it and said, "A surefire way to lose your job is to have that right there." I told her I haven't been on it and that it couldn't fit in my pocket. She then says, "Yes, you've been on it. Those cameras tell the truth." You hear me? Naturally, I defend myself and said that she can look on the cameras. I haven't been on it. Also, yes, I hear you. She then decides that the best course of action is to threaten to drag me into the parking lot and beat my ass for disrespecting her. I quit shortly after. Comes to find out, nearly 60% of all the workers there ended up quitting behind me because apparently this employee had threatened them as well, with one actually resulting in a fist fight. They said they quit because the manager would not do anything about it and even refused to fire her after the same employee said in front of customers that they shouldn't call the assistant manager Story 33 by changing management styles, basically every day. The classic, "My door is always open." They email me first before coming into my office. "Have you tried working this out with your peers together first?" The "Why do you think I called you in here?" after every time I tell you to come into my office, the "I don't eat lunch with any member of the team anymore," as they are my subordinates now. The "Why doesn't anyone on the team treat me the same anymore? Why don't they like me?" The "Come see me at the end of the day, just to check in before you leave." The "No, seriously, coming to see me is now mandatory before you leave for the day." The "Email me when you come in and when you leave every day." The "Why'd you take a 45-minute lunch break whilst going to Walmart for 3 hours this morning and coming back with a goddamn Chipotle cup?" Story 34. We had an entire system worked out at work. Very small administrative department, because it was basically a chain of administrative documents that had to go from person to person. Everyone knew who they were getting documents from and who they were supposed to give it to next, so it could be registered in the correct departments. New supervisor comes in, decides the system is crap, and decrees that from now on, every document is placed on a specific table where they can then be picked up by the staff. Productivity also needed to go up by 30%. Week 1 hadn't passed, and everything was a mess already. Papers filed incorrectly. Some departments hadn't even seen the documents before they were rushed out, so they were missing authorization for the laborers outside. Customers complaining about not getting their shipments. He grudgingly went back to our old methods during week 2, but we were already way behind everything. He then quit during week 3 because he felt unneeded in the company. Story 35. This took a few months, but it's still currently happening. Promoted within, no experience in the role, and doesn't understand everyone's job. There's about 3 branches in this adept. She came from one and only understands that one. Immediately lays the hammer down. Starts yelling at people and sending bossy email instead of managing she bosses. She also micromanages and has unrealistic expectations due to not knowing our jobs. Hosts awkward meetings. Instead of lifting you up and giving you the tools to succeed, you're criticized and put down for not meeting her standards. Despite not knowing the ins and outs of your job, she'll tell you how to do it. She'll hand off projects last minute with little info and communication and a closed due date, which she already promised to the customer, setting you up for failure, and won't even tell you the date or who the customer is. She has obvious favorites and has asked multiple people to be her eyes and ears because she's extremely insecure and cries when stressed. Every conversation comes off as confrontational. You'll get thrown under the bus and used as a scapegoat. Nobody likes it here anymore and have begun trickling out one by one. She'll talk to you like you're a child. I've been treated like crap repeatedly and scapegoated plenty. Went from having a clean track record to ducking up all the time, apparently. But I've learned a lot. Anything less than job is complete, I no longer report. I stay off her radar while I look for other opportunities. Story 36. Worked in finance for a large bank, and the bank decided to fire about 90% of their mortgage officers. They were all called in for their annual mortgage meeting, and once they got there, they were all fired on the spot. The branch operations department knew about this and had reps outside ready to hire the people who weren't storming off in frustration. They chose to hire these mortgage lenders as the new assistant managers for different branches because it paid the same and was considered a lateral move. However, getting to assistant manager normally takes years of experience, handling customer frustrations, learning how to balance vaults and order the right amount of cash by monitoring trends of when we need more cash on hand, opening accounts accurately, scheduling staff, different security protocols for how to open and close the branch, and what to do if there's a robbery. There's so much they have to learn, and these new mortgage officers were immediately thrown in with zero experience or training. The woman assigned to our branch was awful, would hand out wrong amounts of cash. We literally had zero, $50, or $100 because she didn't order any. Imagine coming in for a $1,000 withdrawal, and you're the teller having to explain that we're out of big bills and the $20 are in the ATM, so we can give you mostly $10 and some $20. She messed up account openings, assigning debit cards to other accounts so the person would swipe their card and the money would come out of some random customer's account. It was a nightmare. And guess who had to clean everything up and deal with everything she was doing? The tellers and supervisors she stepped over to be ABM. Story 37. Had a kid who worked at a different store through college get hired to my store as an assistant manager after he graduated. He talked crap about and to coworkers and other store managers. He talked crap to customers and told them they were wrong when I'd find they were right within seconds. He wanted to supervise every minute of our shift. Dude wouldn't let me go in the warehouse because there's no place to sit and supervise from it. Despite being 6 years younger than me, he talked down to me like I was a little kid. Instead of being like, "Can you help me put together this scaffold here?" He was like, "Do you remember Frozen? You know that song, 'Let's build a snowman'? Today we're gonna build a scaffold." He once made me dump all the items from our storage room into a cart, stock what was needed, then put them all back up in the storage room. Later in his short career, he obviously wanted to root us all out and have a new crew of yes men. He had a talk with each of us that if we don't meet our account goals by the end of the month, there will be discipline. Shortly after, I get called to the phone by my manager who tells me to take it in the office and close the door. It is my DM who said he will soon page me to an HR rep who wants to talk to me. I thought, oh crap. He wrote me up for insubordination or some crap and I'm done for. I had just bought a new car a few months before and could not afford to be fired right now. Fortunately, they were investigating my assistant manager for bullying and harassment. He ended up fired after being suspended for a few weeks. Story 38. I worked at a call center for a couple years with dreams of working my way up the corporate ladder. What a joke. The department had a service level goal, which we were supposed to hit daily, 80%. The department was set into 3 teams. The manager position for one team opened, and someone filled it. He was the definition of micromanagement. From his computer screen, we'd see that he would have the entire department's statuses up to make sure we're readily available to be taking calls instead of taking a 30-second 1-minute break in between dealing with crafty, selfish, stubborn customers. He'd quickly send us a message saying, "Could you please be available for calls?" We also had other tasks to keep us off the phone for portions of the day and to keep our sanity, which this manager was determined to keep us off of to uphold the service level. Very often, the service level would be like 93% with 30 people available for calls, no calls in queue, and he'd send out a department-wide email asking everyone stays off their tasks until whatever time, so we don't possibly lose hold of it. The best part was that there was no bonus or any real payoff for us hitting it. Management got a bonus supposedly, but we just got a "thank you for all your hard work" email every few days. Definitely not the worst out of all these stories, but it was probably the most mentally defeating job I've ever had. And his presence management style just added insult to injury. Story 39. Companies suck and don't care about us at all. So many of these stories are outside hires coming in and making changes. Every job I've left is because they've all promised for years that they promote from within, then endlessly hire outside management. They come in, have big egos thinking they need to make changes, don't understand any of the logistics or computer systems used or anything, don't understand why things are done a certain way, and don't understand the ramifications of their decisions. People under them quit out of frustration or because they're bad managers who just interview really well to get the job, then are terrible after that. They don't last long before finding another job because they just want more money and have no loyalty to any company they work for. Rinse and repeat. Company has tons of qualified internal candidates apply to replace, but an outside hire gets the job. Sadly, I've heard a theory that companies do this on purpose. An outside manager can be hired at a lower salary than if they were to promote from within and have to give an internal candidate a substantial raise. Then they don't care about employee turnover because, oh, too bad. Janet has been here 10 years with annual raises. Oh well, we can replace her with 2 new people starting at minimum wage and still pay them less than we were paying her. When I left a job, my replacement was hired as a hybrid, doing basically their current job and my job at the same time. Ended up paying $4 or less than what I was making doing my one job. Twice the workload, less money to do it. Made me realize my company, and many others, are just waiting for people to leave. Story 40. Worked for a place with a great company culture and bright future. Growth mandated that we set up a new head of department position. The bigwigs spent 6 months vetting possible hires and pick a really great one. 2 days before he's supposed to start, he has a heart attack and passes away. So the bigwigs scramble down the list. Next few candidates already hired out. So we end up with like a 4th or 5th round pick. A man with an employment background, one I was uniquely familiar with, totally unsuited for the particular position. I expressed my concerns, but by that point, they were desperate and hired the guy practically unvetted by the rest of the group. He came in, immediately picked his favorites from the team, and started to ice the rest of us out from the good job assignments. Within months, he'd fired both single mothers, the only guy who knew a set of our particular systems, and a man who'd been with the company for 25 years with only 5 years till pension, who he perceived was his direct competition for seniority. He continued the culling by removing everyone who remotely had a similar personality and working style to him regardless of their performance records. Started bringing in his own cronies. 6 months later, he'd lost most of the original department as the rest of the team jumped ship on their own. After he lost 2 to 3 key skilled and hard-to-replace workers, he tried to dial it back, but damage was done. 3 years later, the entire company culture, thousands of employees, was toast a good chunk of that his doing. But nobody had the cojones to fix the real cause. I was lucky to have bailed early on. Story 41. Worked for a company that was owned by 3 individuals who built up an incredible business over about 10 years and sold to a large national company. One of the owners was technically the manager as well, and was absolutely awesome. Treated the employees very well, and was probably the nicest man I've ever known. In comes younger new corporate manager to oversee office operations. He was hired about a month before previously mentioned owner was due to leave and learn from him. On his last day as owner-manager, he went around hugging each employee and saying his goodbyes. People were legit crying over him leaving. New manager couldn't comprehend how the employees were emotional over this. Was making awkward remarks about how silly it was. Didn't take long to realize we were now working for an insensitive corporate shill who had no soul. Story 42. We had a new supervisor join us at the retail job I used to work at. His first impression on everyone wasn't great. He dressed up way too much for what the job was, wearing a suit to a thrift store, and just kind of acted douchey, bragged about the manager position that he had previously at a bar, which we all figured he must have been fired from. Immediately talked down to all the employees. The supervisor team lead felt iffy about him right off the bat, but the last straw was when he called her kiddo. He didn't even last a week until we were all informed he had been let go. Story 43. After a switch up in management all the way to a regional level, a guy who was the former regional of the produce section got demoted to our store as a store manager. This dude thought he was hot crap. That was above everyone else, despite the fact that he just got demoted because he couldn't keep up. He came in and tried to change up everything. Schedules got rewritten. The processes that have been in place since the store opening got changed up. Managers were drilled to increase productivity in a store that was already the best in the entire region and globally in certain areas. He wanted to see an already top-tier store function increasingly better every single weekly check-in. He was so caught up that he started trying to order for my department. We already had a consistent in-stock rate of 95% and sometimes 100%, so this was entirely pointless. He flooded the back room with overstock that we just couldn't push out. Within a month, the store saw a complete turnover in staff. People who had been in their positions for 1-2 decades were walking out in the middle of their shifts. The sudden switch-up and barbaric management practices wound up burning everyone out, and the store quickly fell from the #1 spot in the region to being completely unrecognizable. He lasted all of 2 months before being fired. I walked out in the middle of my shift a few weeks prior. I received a phone call shortly thereafter from corporate offering me my job back with a bonus. And from what I've heard, they did this with everyone that had left the store during his employment. He ducked up that bad. Story 44. Worked as the entire marketing department at an old job for nearly 2 years. Job title of marketing coordinator. They hired a new director of community engagement. Lady was bat crap crazy. It is important to note that they didn't hire a person. People put their resumes in who were already working at the nonprofit, but the executive director ignored them all and gave the job to a friend of hers. Never mentioned anything about wanting a promotion or being a manager. Few months went by and she said to me, "If I had $1 million, I'd promote your coworkers to manager and hire a marketing manager because I don't think you can do the job." Pretty much mentally shut down at that point. And a week or so later, she took me out to pizza and accused me of being suicidal because I wasn't happy. When I called her out on what she said, She literally looked me in the eyes and said, "Oh, I didn't mean it like that." I found a new job and jumped ship a few weeks later. I had to give my 2 weeks notice when my crazy manager was on vacation, which meant I needed to give it to my manager's manager, the executive director. I gave her my notice, and I'll never forget what she said. "Giving your 2 weeks while your manager is out on vacation? That's gutsy." Since I've left, there's been a 300% turnover rate in the community engagement department of this nonprofit. It kills me because it was legit my dream job, but I refuse to work for someone who is clinically insane. Story 45. Not a manager, but a new supervisor at a hotel I worked at. She tried to fix/change things that didn't need to, while ignoring things that absolutely needed to change. Here's one example. I was a shuttle driver at the time, and we had a simple get-to-the-point sign-up sheet for it. Guests just had to put their name, number of people, next to a time of the day. She changed the simple one-page sheet to a 2-page sign-up list that added a ton of unnecessary things. We used a new sheet every day. She wanted us to print out one extra piece of paper just so we could have a bunch of yes or no checkboxes and room for their phone numbers, room number among other things. Each guest had to fill out 3 lines instead of one simple one. It was a nightmare. We also had a relatively quick check-in process at the front desk. We would pre-assign rooms and pre-make the cards that way. Guests would spend no more than 30 seconds during the check-in process. She got rid of that and made it 5+ minutes longer per guest by asking them a ton of questions and waiting until they got there to assign a room, which would piss off our Diamond member guests. She tried to change so many things that people started to hate her, and it brought down morale. Story 46. He clock-watched my breaks, but only mine. I called him out during a meeting. Then a manager higher up asked me if it bothered me. I said working in a team of Asians is man, and been called out by a manager who only targeted me, seemed wrong when I was the new guy, and just followed the breaks of everyone else. I've never seen someone have my back as much as her. She mentally slapped his arse in the meeting, and I didn't see him again after that. Turns out, he was weak manager. Story 47. New floor manager told me, 5 years in the role, that I had been doing it wrong the whole time. I protested to no avail. I knew what would happen, but I obeyed my orders anyway, and I was going to tell on him. Crap hit the fan and made an awful mess for another experienced manager, and when they asked what I was doing, I said, "Mr. New Manager told me to do it." I saw them having a chat and pointing at me. They both came over, and Mr. New Manager said I was wrong, and he never told me to do it that way. And then they left. Mr. New Manager came back 30 seconds later, put his finger to his mouth, and told me to keep all this quiet. Naturally, I told anybody that would listen. Same place, same time period, another new manager. This time an old bloke who was even higher up. We'd never spoken before. He caught me cheekily checking my phone. He came over, raised his fist up to my face, and said, next time he caught me, I'd be getting it. I'm not one for a good fisting, so I never got caught again. Those two were toxic clowns, man. They destroyed morale. I left not long after and found out a bit later they had a restructure and both had left my mutual consent. Story 48. Worked in a hotel with a bar. The whole place was on the way out. Half the equipment in the kitchen had been condemned but was still used. The fire alarm system malfunctioned, and the place had generally been run into the ground for years. The staff were paid terribly, treated horribly, and massively overworked. One manager got fired for theft, which was actually my fault, in a different story. And rather than promoting internally, the owners that I never even met decided to get a general manager from the outside, which of course pissed off all the other managers. This new manager had no experience of hotels or restaurants or bars. I worked in the bar. He made a number of cost-cutting measures which were useless or annoying or both. But the biggest mistake he made was deciding that tracking the bars in and out of alcohol was a waste of time. No oulage books. Nothing was accounted for. So he's a useless manager who is barely around. All the other staff, including the managers working under him, are pissed off. And he's essentially created a free-for-all on the booze. My last month working there, before I quit, were very drunken. The bar manager would pull me off the bar to sit and drink with them in the office. Whole bottles of bourbon would vanish in one go. My bar manager quit just before me and literally raided the liquor, handing out bottles as he went. The whole hotel closed shortly after. Story 49. I used to be an office manager at a meat market. The store manager and assistant store manager left because of the owners, and I had to start running things with no experience. Things went pretty well, and they offered me the store manager position, but I declined since I was going to college and didn't have the time to commit. Well, the owners hired someone from out of state with glowing recommendations, and they were super excited for her to get here. First day she's here, she starts nitpicking everyone and telling us what she was going to change, some of which I agreed with. Day 2, I come into every employee who worked with her, wanting to lodge a complaint. I took down everything and passed it to the owners as I was supposed to monitor her during her first few weeks. Told the owners that if things weren't resolved, I was going to quit, and if any of the other employees found out, they could have a lot of trouble coming. Day 4, she was fired. Story 50. I was a young engineer in a group working in a niche field. The group was highly educated, trained. Everyone had at least a single master's degree. Most people had multiple masters, and a couple people had PhDs. Some of the members of that team had been doing that work for decades. A new manager came in and decided to shake things up. All jobs were available via an open competition. If you wanted to stay, you had to apply for your job and sit through an interview process just like everyone else. Most of the new kids like myself did just that. A few of the old guys nearing retirement decided it was just a game and decided to play along. Almost all the mid-level workers, those engineers with 10+ years experience, but not close to retirement, bailed. They figured they could make the same money working in an adjacent field and not have to put up with this douche nozzle. Within 2 months, the team was a shell of its former self. Within 3 or 4 years, all the old guys had retired and there was almost no continuity or corporate knowledge left. The young kids like myself were often dumped into situations that were way out of our depth. Looking back, I cringe at how many really terrible decisions I ended up making because there was no one around who knew better. That manager only lasted a couple years. The damage he did was permanent. Story 51. After being in the post 5 months, the new GM didn't even attend our branch's Christmas party. How the duck do you not bother to attend your own store's Christmas party as the main manager? Only 1 of 5 of the floor managers bothered to attend, actually. Now I think of it. What a ducking joke. And then they grab us guys to ream us out every once in a while, saying how hard they work and how we're slacking. To be fair, half the team do slack, yeah, but also, to be fair, how crap are you at management? The one manager that attended even bought me a drink out of her own pocket. I'll never forget that. What a decent woman. Good heart. Did her best to make the party work, and it did somewhat. I imagine she'll be gone soon. Too good for this store. She seems so down and tired every time I see her in this place. I wouldn't put up with half the bullcrap and incompetence she does. So yeah, new GM is a ghost, and surprise, surprise, the store's going to crap. She'll use this place as a stepping stone. They all do. But what an insult they have an anonymous survey going around about at the moment. But we all know how anonymous that is. So I'll be wise made mistakes speaking up before when I believed the world was good and true and honesty and all that good crap prospered. Story 52. I totally ducked up a workplace. I worked at a company for a few months and was given a management position with a team of 8 employees. I was bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and was so excited to make a difference. In the first week, one employee complained to me about how she never felt appreciated for her work. I told her I want to help fix that and that I appreciate her. She was so sincere and open with me that I felt I could trust her. She talked with me a few times. After that, we got a bit closer. She then started talking about other employees, and it totally made me bias, even though I thought I wasn't letting it affect me. I started believing what she would tell me and treated those employees differently. It must have been obvious the information I had received came from this one employee, because the other team members began telling me how bad she is, etc. This stirred up so much drama and hatred between everyone while I thought I was doing good by trying to make everyone feel heard. After the chaos started, it was never ending. Everyone became so petty and focused on each other's mistakes. I ended up asking them to step down. Looking back, I should not have been a manager so early. I clearly didn't have the experience with boundaries to prepare me with working in that group. Story 53. This was before my time, but the stories of this man still circle around, and he left over a decade ago. At a university, a new director came into our office and immediately forbade staff to talk to faculty or any other staff about projects. Communicating with faculty especially is a huge facet of our work, saying they had to clear it with him first. That was enough of an issue, but he was almost never around for them to ask him anything. Most of the time he came in around 5 and worked until 1 a.m. or so. Rest of staff were there during normal business hours. To add on to all that, he was a severe hypochondriac, forcing one analyst to stay home once because her kid had strep. He was convinced that if she came into work, her husband was taking care of their kid, that she would spread it around to everyone. And finally, he was convinced the office was wiretapped in some way and that someone was spying on him. It made for an incredibly tense atmosphere, to say the least. In his 10 months at the helm, he drove away 3 or 4 people in an office of 9, and another 2 had other job offers on the table when they heard the director had been fired and decided to stay. By the time I came on board, it had thankfully become much more peaceful. Story 54. Currently dealing with this situation, new executive director comes in and start replacing department heads. With friends from her previous employment, our new customer service director, my boss, has never been a director before, and was an office manager at their previous location. First thing she does is remove everyone's access to the database management system. Now invoices are not being generated, applications are not being processed, and paying customers are at an all-time low during what should be the busiest time of the year for us. Whenever us grizzled vets try to point out things to remedy the situation and try to repair damage, it's being done. she starts threatening termination and getting upset. When we went to the new executive director to register complaint against the customer service director, we're met with, "You don't understand how she is. She's not mad at you. It's just how she talks to people. I've known her a really long time, and that's not how she really is." All this toxic bullcrap that you wouldn't expect from an employer. But witness on an episode of Cops during a domestic violence call. "I'm tired of leaving work every day with a proverbial black eye from my boss when I'm just trying to make the company run smoothly, efficiently, and reduce result based on my 14 years of experience." Story 55. British gastropub. Head chef moved on to a different place. Companies started looking for hires. And here comes this young Bulgarian guy, about 25, claiming to have been assistant to the head chef in a busy restaurant and wanted to try his hand at managing his own kitchen. Little did we know. Long story short, literally everything he said was a lie. He never even seen a kitchen in his life and was the laziest git ever. A few examples. He couldn't cook a boiled egg. Once he even put one in the microwave, with explosive results. When tickets started coming in, he would grab a box of salad and pretend washing it leaf by leaf. Average 40 minutes per leaf, prepped 7 portions of fish cakes in 5 hours. Takes about 10 minutes to prep that much. And his crowning achievement, the time he came in at 1600 for an evening shift, immediately complained it was too hot, and leaving at 1640. Leaving the other colleague, who was supposed to finish at 17 alone, he pulled a double shift, then went straight to the GM and resigned that same evening. Wanted to bang a colleague, she turned him down repeatedly. Then he started telling everyone she was the one wanting to bang him. In a couple of months, managed to get the entire team asked for a transfer before finally getting sacked. Story 56. I worked in a nationwide recruiting agency for a while. Our location manager promoted his mistress, he had a pregnant wife at home, to be the supervisor for my team. She was never really good at her job before the promotion, so we all knew that she just landed the job because of other qualifications. She was the worst supervisor I ever had. She was really emotional, and as soon as we would say that something doesn't run smoothly, she would start crying. She demanded higher sales than ever before, all goals that she never reached in the time before she was promoted. Half of her working time, she was in the office of our location manager for management training with closed doors. Thankfully for us, she and the location manager could help but duck on the toilet during a company-wide event. Someone saw them leave the toilet together, and they both were fired. Rumor has it that after the manager's baby was born, he lost interest in his mistress, and she then started having an affair with her new manager at the next job. He happened to be an old co-worker of us and knew everything that happened before. Story 57. The guy decided it was his time to change nearly everything about the shop. In my section, he put a site that was new to the unit in charge over Marines who had been with the unit for years and knew how to get things done. This shit actually had to gall to tell CPLs that they weren't NCOs, and he would not treat us as such. After we got a boot drop, he told the 20-plus Marines who were getting out not to come into work anymore. I guess he didn't want us to corrupt his new ignorant junior Marine. He then tried to move everyone around in the barracks, which is not his responsibility or job, so that the guys who were getting out would be basically sectioned off from everyone else. After I got out, he started making the shop do in-house field ops weekly, on top of the regular training schedule that saw the shop doing company-level training. This was in 2010. So the Marine Corps was transitioning to peacetime, and so there was no imminent threat that they needed to prepare for. No one that I knew from then actually re-enlisted after that, unless they were already on their second contract. I'm pretty sure that whatever motivated Marines were in that unit had their motivation killed by that guy. Story 58. I worked for a large food producer that was building a new plant. They already had 2 plants, with 2 supply chain teams. The teams were both pretty competent with their own managers. With the move, they sold the oldest plant and moved it to the new one. In a masterstroke of idiocracy, they thought it was a good idea to shuffle the teams and redistribute them in 2 new teams. I was under Manager A, who was a raging Karen. Manager B suffered a burnout because of the move. Manager A picked all the top dogs for her team. When this was announced, it was just her and the HR partner who told us who our new boss was and which plant we would be working. This is a big no-no in the Netherlands, where people expect to have a say in where they work and what they do. Both teams completely drained before the move, and the company had to attract an external consultancy firm to stabilize the supply chain after all know-how was gone. The shuffle probably cost them millions. Story 59. We had a system at work, and it was effective and did the job well. We finished work really early and got started on any new project early. The biggest thing was that we did prep before shutting down, which set up things to be smoother for the next day. New manager came in. Nope. This is a waste of company time and property. Instead, he wanted people to work 24/7 around the clock. If your cell phone is off, it's almost as bad as a no-call and no-show. Productivity dropped. People were more eager to just leave the moment the clock hit 5. People quit, people left, people complained. We had one big shot to visit us, and when he saw how much hell things went in a few weeks, he practically fired the new manager in a heartbeat. Qui, our guy with the largest amount of seniority, laughing and clapping. I told you, you'd duck it up, and moonwalking away. Apparently, the big shot was surprised how much they were paying him and promoting him. Last time I talked to him, he was like, crap, I should have kept my mouth shut. This was 3 years ago. He is still manager, and things are going smoothly. He just wishes he was back at his original desk instead of running the office now. Story 60. 26 years old, working for a corporate manufacturing company for 2 years. Current boss tells me he's leaving and has recommended that I be made the new head of the department. 2 VPs proceed to say that I'm too young to run the department. Promote 38-year-old coworker instead. I stick around because I'm a top employee, even being too young. I'm told by the new supervisor that he wants to change my title to lead. I agree, but he proceeds to tell me that I'm the lowest paid employee in the department compared to employees 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'm the one who has been keeping the department afloat during his transition to power. He turned power hungry and became a huge get to everyone in the department, but was considered to be a joke throughout the company and among clients. Needless to say, I found a position in a geographic location that my wife and I love. Ended up getting this new position with relocation benefits and higher pay. My previous company's department fell apart, and my old boss was demoted back to his old position 6 months after I left the company. Feels good. Story 61. I just got this new assistant manager 3-4 weeks in, and she's pretty slow. She likes to be walked through your job so she can know what's being done. Everyone at my job, even other managers, all talk about how they're ready to find a new job on tough days. My best friend works with me, and while waiting for her to come back for some double checks, he's on the phone and says, I wish I could go, but my hours are crap and I'm ready to find a new job. She heard him say that and sent him home for the day at 10 p.m. The next day, our department manager gave him a talk and basically gave him an ultimatum. He put in his 2 weeks notice because he's been asking for earlier shifts, but was refused and straight up said he wouldn't get them even before this talk. So for him to be asked by our department manager, what can we do to make things better, only to be told no again. We've been making jokes about him quitting for 4 days now. I'll miss him, and none of the night shift workers are too keen on the new AM after that. Story 62. Dumb but ambitious. Dude was a middle manager made in hell. Was a security guy that they brought in to manage a loading dock. The dock itself was small. It was crammed into a mall, so space was at a premium. We kept it clean and functional. He comes in and makes a bunch of changes. Looking back, I suspect that they were because in his head he was still a security guy, and they might very well have been better for preventing theft. But that wasn't his job. His job was to unload trucks, and the changes he made took up space we didn't have and slowed our workflow to a crawl. To boot, he was hopelessly optimistic. At the end of the day, if the truck wasn't unloaded, we would get pallets and palletize the whatever was left on the truck, leaving it empty and the boxes on the dock so we could unpack them and push them to the floor the next morning. Multiple times, the call to palletize was made minutes before the close of the day, forcing the entire crew to take overtime when it was apparent hours beforehand that the truck wouldn't be empty by quitting time. If you told him that, though, he'd just tell you to work faster. Story 63. I was the new manager, but it was how the new ownership handled letting the old manager go. I was hired as a production manager at an Alpha Graphics. The outgoing production manager was training me for a few days when I asked him what his new position was and if he was excited about it. He just blankly stared at me for a minute, then said, "What are you talking about? I'm not leaving this job. I'm training you to be an assistant production manager, right?" The look on my face must have tipped him off. He jumped up, went into the owner's office where they screamed at each other for 10 minutes or so before he stormed out while giving me the finger. Over the next 2 months, my team went from 16 people down to 3. The new owner, who also knew nothing about our industry, wouldn't let up push deadlines or adjust the deadlines on new projects to account for the lack of staff. She also wouldn't allow me to up the pay range to get quality people in quickly. After another month of being screamed at for missing deadlines, I quit as well. Story 64. My boss comes in hot from a similar company in the industry that does things quite differently. Immediately starts putting out decrees via email for things ranging from "that's a banana move" to "yeah mate, that's illegal." He crap talks our EAT guy for 4 months before realizing how valuable he is. He schedules weekly 20-minute 1-1 meetings and half of the time is careening about others on our team using their names. He tried to ban us from working at home or charging for our travel time before HR stepped in to say he doesn't have the power to do that. What's worse, he openly says things in team meetings like, "I like Joe, he is model employee, he work hard like senior, but he get paid like junior so we can spend money elsewhere. Earned value is so good. Everyone should try to be like Joe." Well, Joe didn't get the promotion he was due for 5 months prior. 2 others, who also deserved it, mind you, did. And then Bossman says he Worked hard to get these 2 promotions, so no more promotions for a year. Duck this fool. Story 65. Had a new manager at a BBQ restaurant I worked at in college. After she yelled at me in front of all the customers in the lobby for throwing a fork that was on the counter away, I put my 2 weeks in. To her credit, the trash was on the same counter, and she just thought I put it back with the clean forks. But her reaction was very extreme and public. She was only around for a month at that point, and that was just the tipping point for me. I found out 2 weeks later that she put a tall pan of beans in the smoker on the top rotating shelf instead of the bottom, giving more room to rotate, and the smoker jammed up and broke. Cost a ton to repair, and she resigned because she got a much better job elsewhere. Also, she lied on her resume saying she had a doctorate in cooking, because who's going to believe that? Story 66. Worked for a brewery-owned pub in the UK who were having managerial problems since the previous long-term managers were siphoned off to go fix a failing pub. After 2 sets of temporary managers came in, we finally landed with a proper manager who was supposed to be there long-term and continue running the business and turn a profit. Anyway, long story short, the guy ordered 15 boxes of M&Ms, which featured nothing on our menu, took them and took off. Like we just walked in one day with nobody in charge and no access to certain levels of the business. After a few days of not reporting in, I guess the brewery heard. Bizarre turn of events. We lost a bunch of money, but it wasn't really our issue. Story 67. I had been at my previous retail employment for a couple years. I had worked my way up to assistant manager. I had a strong loyalty from the rest of the staff as I had always accommodated their personal needs, protected them from other managers' harassment and other things. We got a new store manager sent to us by district. She was a bigot and would only hire women. She hired one girl who bragged about suing every employer she ever had simply because she was the only female candidate. She started to talk to the other employees about getting rid of me because I was male. She even falsely accused me of theft. I bailed and got another job. Within 2 weeks, half the staff quit. She got moved to another store for gross mismanagement. Her favorite other manager got fired for harassment, and the suing girl that she hired had opened a lawsuit against the company. It took the company 2 years to save that store. I laughed the whole time. Story 68. The old CFO at my company worked from home, but gradually was convinced by the CEO to work more in the office. The guy was very traditional and very stern, i.e., the workplace was not a place for idle chit-chat. Employees weren't to take many bathroom breaks, etc. We were told our attitudes were being observed. In the span of 6 months, like 4 people had been let go for not being a good fit. It got to the point where we felt if we didn't consciously smile and act with enthusiasm, we'd be fired. It felt like I was in a cult or something and ended up leaving Story 69, yelled at someone for not being at work when they were away on holidays, that the manager had to approve. Icing on the cake was questioning why they couldn't get a hold of the worker on the vacation. One employee stole a $3,000 sale from another employee. When the person stolen from complained, they were told, "Well, you're already not going to make budget this month. Does another $3,000 matter?" In the first case, the person wanted to quit and they had just started, and the second not only led to the person's work effort dropping to 0, but there was major tension as the two had to work together. As a bonus, and what made me really angry, was that the employee had only recently started in sales and before that had been in a really poorly paid position. When admin, the employee she stole from, had more than once organized fundraising for the thief or bought them some groceries, etc. Story 70. I was the design director at a manufacturing and design-build construction company. We were bought out by a manufacturing guy who came from McKinsey. No experience in the construction industry. He could not wrap his head around how different construction is from manufacturing as far as business/operations financials are concerned, and decided that we were going to run construction projects just like a manufacturing business, and that he would set out on a campaign to educate the construction world, to see why he was right and they should be operating per his concepts. We were a 12 mineral wire company dealing with billion-dollar general contractors. It did not go well. I was one of the first to jump ship before he had a chance to ruin my reputation, and the company folded within a year of my keeving, 2 years of the buyout. Story 71. Friend worked as a bartender for the busiest pub in town. Owner decided to bring in foreign manager who was ex-military and had a reputation for helping restaurants save money. He began to micromanage the absolute crap out of everything, screaming belligerently at people for things like having 5 cherry tomatoes on a garden salad instead of 4, nitpicking everything staff did, never smiling. He was hired to save money, but within 1 month, 12 out of 18 employees straight up quit, costing the establishment much more in turnover and training. The takeaway from this: value you employees, and if things aren't broken, don't try to overhaul them. If you want improvements and changes, including people, if you need to change the behavior of staff, talk civilly and coach them. Don't scream your goddamn head off like the soup Nazi. Story 72. former pizza driver here. We had a new low-level manager transfer from another location, and he just wrongly assumed the culture of our workplace. He would bark orders at people, something our ongoing boss, his new boss, didn't even do. Then try to be buddy-buddy with them after the little rush was over. He would just be too mean, immediately followed by being too friendly, and it turned most drivers off. Also had no idea how our store ran and would try doing things his store's way, which just didn't work. Nobody was too worried about getting fired, since the job was already going downhill, so everyone pretty much clapped back at him whenever he'd get snippy and undermine him right in front of his boss. He never got in much trouble or anything, but the crew downright rejected him and put him in his place somewhat. Story 73. In American nursing, there is a small but very forceful minority of women who vehemently hate men and do not want them working in the profession. When our old manager moved to a new job, they replaced him with one of these types of people. Her first project on the job was doing impromptu reviews of all the staff. All women were rated highly, while all men were given 1, 2, 5 in all categories. She used this as justification to fire all 10 male nurses from the staff, myself included. Most of the men who worked there were among the most experienced and skilled nurses on the floor. Short-staffed and lacking direction, the floor immediately suffered a huge uptick in accidents, complaints, and plummeting patient care quality, causing around 60 of the remaining 70 female nurses to voluntarily quit. Ironically, firing all the men lost her all the women. Story 74. A new head chef at a brand new restaurant. She was under the influence of a chiropractor, and she was going to serve healthy food. She also was a firm believer in doilies and putting flowers on each plate. So one day in the first week of operation, her chiropractor shows up with a station wagon full of all sorts of healthy stuff he's selling. Everything from kitchen utensils to powders and pills and white bottles and jars. The owner comes into the kitchen and sees a large prep table covered with the chiropractor's merch, and that was the end of that. The business survived, but it was pretty dicey there for a while. The chiropractor was only one of the crazy things she did. She was a very nice lady, but very crazy and very much into doilies and flowers on plates, edible or not. Story 75. Company bought by another company. Some staff quit, no replacements were hired, leading to an inevitable, and we all thought undeniable, drop in quality. New group manager sent by new owners comes to see us, gives his speech about the way ahead, asks for question. Colleague, what will be done about the recent drop in quality? Manager, there has been no drop in quality. Then he immediately launched into a repetition of a completely irrelevant chunk of his previous speech, with the only real difference being that now everybody listening was thinking he was either an idiot or a liar. He has since done nothing to dispel that belief. Story 76. I took a position at a small, privately held company, only 87 people, for less than market rate, because I was interested in what they were doing, and I was told when hired that there was room for advancement. It was the best job I've ever had. Manageable workload, good management, happy customers, great work team. The missing salary was a small price to pay. Then we were bought by a corporate group. Good projects got reassigned to their people. Possibilities for advancement disappeared. New management made it clear that we were all paid too highly. Half of our 87 extremely productive people were let go. No one ever picked up their workload. I called my old contract recruiter and bailed for a higher paying job. Last I heard, the company's revenue stream tanked because no one was completing any projects. Story 77. A former manager used their company phone as a hotspot to watch Netflix at home since they didn't have internet. This happened for their first month on the job, until the phone bill came in. Apparently that one bill was for over $3K. Story 78. I was working for a trucking company, and they promoted one of the drivers to a new position as supervisor over all the drivers. He immediately started cracking the whip, so to speak, giving people crap for taking too long and pushing people to get more work done in less time. He installed cameras in the warehouse and had them set up to watch from home. The worst was when he ducked with the schedule, changed people's shifts that had been consistent for years. But the final straw was when he scheduled everyone to be on call for every single day that they weren't scheduled to be working, so he could give you crap for not be willing to come into work anytime he called. That was when morale went from bad to almost open mutiny. Story 79. New manager came in, was trying to make a joke to the Asian dude at our place, super cool dude, super level-headed, and the way he micro-focused on tasks was super admirable. His name was Thong, pronounced Tong Thong. Always joked about that with us. And Thong asked to clock out after his shift ended, and manager guy said, "Yeah, you're good to go. Don't have too much fun playing with chopsticks or whatever you do." It was meant as a joke, but it was really crafty at the moment. Story 80. Area manager brought in to oversee restructuring. Company speaks for redundancies. Not knowing who anybody was or what they did, she chose redundancies for reasons that no one can understand, without looking at annual assessments or production figures. She got rid of half the team and chose the ones who had the most experience and highest production stats for the core work. 4 months later, after everything went to crap and morale amongst the remaining workers plummeted, she asked 3 out of the 6 to come back. We kept our full redundancy pay, GOA bonus, and a pay rise, and she's still in her job. Made some spurious claim about new working methods, meaning an increase in production happening. Story 81. Put washing up liquid in the dishwasher. Washing up liquid is for pots and stuff that needs hand washed. The dishwasher uses a powder that gets fed in gradually. 2 minutes later, the kitchen is covered in soap bubbles over a foot deep. Story 82. Working in a restaurant, we had gotten a new manager from another location. At his last location, he had to be transferred to us because he got a host pregnant. To make it worse, he was engaged to someone else at the time. He was just a crafty manager in general. But the thing that got him fired was that he had used hot schedules to get the phone number of a host and started texting her saying things like, "You need to work this day because you're too pretty and I have to see you sooner." He also told her he was 23 when he was in reality 30. He got fired after the girl showed the texts to his boss. The host at his last location was still pregnant. Story 83. Had a division manager at UPS who was really young and right out of college, replaced the one who'd been in the spot for over 10 years. I remember just how much he was screaming his first night on the job at supervisors who didn't even know his name. He tried instituting all this random red tape, which just slowed us down and bred resentment. He got transferred after less than a month when production went stagnant and even fell. The whole time I was like, how did you get this job? The next DM was awesome, and our numbers improved appreciably. It's not unusual for bosses on the night shift to blow their lid from time to time, but he really had no idea what he was talking about. Story 84. Spent 6 months at a startup. It was a bad job to begin with, but then a new manager was brought in and he immediately laid off a third of the workforce. Suddenly, I had way more work on my plate and was struggling to keep up every day. He'd bark at people all day about productivity and carrying their weight. I knew I needed to get out and put in my 2 weeks soon after. I wasn't the only one. 6 people left on the same Friday that I did, and about a month later, I checked LinkedIn and saw that maybe 10 of my former coworkers were still there. That place went under about 3 months later, and that manager sent me a friend request on Facebook. No. Story 85. Dude Al Shal. Brian came in as the HR manager. He seemed qualified enough, so we didn't question the way he worked. After 2 months of him working at this company, we had a pretty bad understaffing problem. So in an effort to combat this, we put out ads asking if anybody would like to work here. Lots of interesting interviews later, we had every position filled. This on paper looks good, but it turns out that every person that Brian had hired was either a felon or wasn't 18 yet. So even though we had all positions filled, no one could operate the equipment. Brian basically ducked over that whole company because of his I know what the best interest of the company is attitude. Damn you, Brian Storian. Marketing director was put in charge of customer service and early collections. They swore the reason every cross-sale program failed was because our managers weren't incentivizing or coaching correctly. We were a subprime auto fiancé company. Our customers weren't good with money. Many of them didn't have access to credit cards. Roadside assistance wasn't a priority for them, especially when the company you're trying to get us to sell was more expensive and had less benefits. Then 6 months after they took over, all cross-sale programs were ended. AHT was through the roof. Early collections was missing targets. The director didn't lose his job, though. Somehow he managed to convince the even worse subprime lender than us that bought our portfolio that his idea were sound. Story 87. Every new manager is trying to do everything by the book, and it's hilarious for the employees who had been working there for years. No, you can't eat that piece of cheese. It's not your official break. We have no official break. There's no time. What do you mean you have no official break? Spends the day organizing official break times. Next week. Okay, guys, here's the official break times for your shifts. This isn't gonna work. There is no time for breaks. I just made time. You can either keep to it or we can have another discussion in the office. Employees keep to the break times. Workplace goes to crap, as predicted. New manager scratching his head, wondering how this happened. Story 88. Dude was extremely awful. Sacked a bunch of the maintenance dudes. Slept with the receptionist, housekeeping found them, and promoted her as assistant manager. He was the regional manager. He redesigned the bar, put cheap graffiti everywhere, and a wall of fake money from all over the world. It looked like straight trash. This man was in his 50s and insisted on going out with us after our shifts. Just to put it into perspective, we were mostly girls all working in the bar, so our shifts ended around 1 to 3:30 a.m. every day. Story 89. I worked in an electronics department at a department store. The old manager, who was amazing BTW, had recently retired, so they hired a new one named Sam. Sam had claimed to have had experience in management from working as a manager at Best Buy. But you could obviously tell he did not have experience whatsoever. In the 3 months before they fired him, he 1. Lost multiple for TV displays, leading us to have to take some down. 2. Broke a display TV from not knowing how to use a screwdriver. 3. Through a combination of taking bad product returns and general incompetence, cost the store over $5,000. He was also pretty creepy on the girls, but that's neither here nor there. Story 90. My pie hired a postdoc a few years ago with a great CV. Unfortunately, she had absolutely no skills since technicians did her whole PhD. When she arrived, looked at the place and decided it was not good enough for her. She then proceeded to replace perfectly good equipment because it was old. She spent thousands and took advantage of my very hands-off pie. She sucked the joy out of the room whenever she walked in the room, out of fear that she would bark an order. On the plus side, a new pie practically furnished their lab with all the equipment that was dumped. Story 91. It's not really bad, but I have a manager that I despise, and as soon as he came in, I work at a restaurant, he got put in charge of the tips. Because of him, he wasn't distributing them correctly, was giving people the wrong amounts, and sometimes wouldn't even give them to people at all. Now we have to sign for all the tips we get because of his screw-ups. Not a huge deal, but it could have been avoided if we didn't have a man who resembles a fat gopher and doesn't know how to do the simplest of jobs. Story 92. Worked in the print industry for a fairly large company. Company was purchased by new owners, and they hired a new manager from within. Gal knew how to be a great account manager despite not having seniority, so the rest of us didn't mind. Problem was, between the new owners and her, they began to hemorrhage money on things like expensive equipment, office furniture, a new office building or warehouse, raffle prizes for the warehouse. Heck, morale was high, but I knew this couldn't last, so I skedaddled ASAP. A few months after I left, the business was shut down by the bank. They lost millions in less than a year. Story 93. Come in, decides to fire all union representatives under false pretext, then fire all the operational people, leaving no one but the board. Unfortunately, the company is publicly funded, so there won't be any consequences. Story 94. Used to work in telemarketing. Did live reviews with people who were struggling to get their numbers above the targets. Office's rating was about 87% for a solid 6 months. New manager gets the reviewers out and puts us online because he believed 3 experts, and that's a stretch, on evaluation could get the numbers to 98 by not helping everyone else. Results went down to 70 in the first month, 65 in the second, and 68 in the third. He got fired. The new dude got us back to reviewing. Not live, but still gave feedback. Numbers got back up in the second week. Story 95. Owner of my former company decided it would be a great idea to hire all of her friends and pay them 6-figure salaries to do high-level strategy. High-level strategy typically meant that on most days they sat in each other's offices gossiping, drinking coffee, and having hours-long lunches. Oh, and don't forget the yoga sessions twice a week. We had about 6 or 7 people in the company who were making over $100K, and I honestly couldn't tell you what any of them actually did. Mind you, we are talking about a small company here, with about 15 core employees. I quit, and a few years later they went bankrupt.